I emailed you the weirdest text, and I was like, "Oh, let's talk about the four P's of love." And yeah, so here we are.
Yeah, well, I think I've argued that love isn't a feeling or an emotion, it's an existential stance. And of course, Christianity said it was a particular kind of existential stance, which of course is a virtue. And you see similar ideas in Sufism, for example, many other places. Um, and a virtue has all four levels in it. A virtue, in fact, is that which integrates the uh, the propositional, the procedural, the perspectival, and the participatory, and then orients them towards becoming responsive of and responsible to the true, the good, and the beautiful. So it's that right integration and orientation, and so obviously love is going to have an aspect of belief in it. You're going to believe about you have beliefs about the beloved. You obviously believe they're a good person. You believe that they love you. Many things like that. If it's a reciprocal relationship, which I hope it is on Valentine's Day, but of course, having beliefs about somebody is not sufficient. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And then people often say, well, I don't just have beliefs, I believe in them. And now we start to move into the non-propositional. And it's not just that I know true things about them, I'm true to them. And that's that normative orientation. But let's unpack it. Well, so loving someone means learning the particular skills, the procedural knowing. And John Wright talks about this as sensibility transcendence. You get this right. You figure out how to fit yourself to that particular person. What's their suchness and their moreness. So it's not the transcendence, right, that is going to generalization. It's about really tailoring yourself to that particular individual. So there's skills that I've cultivated for loving my sons, Jason and Spencer, for loving my partner, Sarah, that are specific to them in a really interesting way. And it makes me realize things about them. And it transforms the beliefs I have about them from sort of categorical to very, very individual. But all of that figuring out is dependent on the perspectival knowing, which is you know, this it's this ongoing kind of flow. It's perspective that opens them up, opens me up. Um, it's like a version of what Daniel Siegel calls mindset resonance. I get some insight into their deeper state, and because of that, I reflectively configure myself so they can read me more easily. And then they get some mindsight into me, and then they reflectively configure themselves so I can read them more easily. And we mindsight resonate with each other. But then, of course, we're also mindsight resonating within and the what without these perspectives. And so we're falling. It's that falling metaphor, that falling, flowing, opening up, mutually accelerating disclosure, as Aaron puts it, or as I put it, the reciprocal opening that's the opposite of the reciprocal narrowing of addiction. And then, of course, at the participatory level, we are cultivating traits of character. We are becoming aware of how we assume identities, roles in the presence of this person, and how we assign identities and roles. And we take that from the having mode, the I it, into the I thou, in which what's happening is this continual, again, at this level, reciprocal opening between how my identity is and how their identity is, for me to acknowledge that there is that in me that comes and goes as Sarah comes and goes. And there is that as me that is drawn beyond myself as Sarah withdraws into her mystery. And there is that is mysterious in me that Sarah reaches into as the way she is being and the way she's making sense of me shines into me. And so I start to get traits of character that I more and more identify with. And she starts to take up, like this is like gnosis. She starts to take up an identity within me. And that's what becomes profound about love, and that is the profound risk we take. Because when that happens, your knowledge of yourself and your knowledge of the person and the knowledge of the world through yourself and the person all become inseparably bound up together. And so losing that person in divorce or death is to lose yourself and a way of seeing and being in the world. It's a profound loss. And so there's the wonderful transcendence of love, but we always have to, in a Stoic and Buddhist fashion, remember that sewn into that is the tremendous vulnerability, inevitability of grief, that reminds us of our finitude. And so, although there's something godlike in love, there's also something profoundly mortal in love. And that gives love this kind of bittersweet longing to it, the longing that the partner would never pass away or pass from you. Um, and part of the virtue is to balance that longing, which can become grasping and clinging and an attempt to control, to avoid the insecurity, with, right, the belonging and the beyonding that you have in that relationship, getting that sort of optimal grip or even a meta optimal grip on all of that. Your humanity, your finite transcendence comes into a profound acceleration of realization in both the epistemic and the existential senses. And if that is true, you're not only being true to that person and true to the relationship, you're being true to your nature as a mortal being that can nevertheless sometimes behold the gods. Um, and so um, love is powerful, love is good, but love is definitely not tame. And anybody who thinks they're going to tame love, I think, is profoundly misapprehending it. And I think we have to separate love then from, pure infatuation, certain rushes of feeling, certain pleasures. Um, and I think we have to really realize love as a virtue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love all of that. I think that's all probably true. Do you ever read Tanabe's Metanoetics where he talks about love qua nothingness?
Yes, yes.
Right. What does that mean to you when you think of love qua nothingness? It's a very Neoplatonic, non-theist perspective in some sense.
It goes towards what I was saying. It goes towards, um, there's that in me which comes and goes as Sarah comes and goes. I heard a Zen abbot. She said that's the best way to understand emptiness, that there's that in me that comes and goes as you come and go, that there's a dynamic relationality that is at the fundamental bottomness of things. And that's what emptiness is. People aren't substances. And love isn't a substance. I'm meaning this in either the Aristotelian or the Cartesian sense. It's fundamentally a relationship that relates to itself, like the way the self is a relationship that relates to itself as it relates to others, right? And so what that means is ultimately love is a profound recognition that you can't have the other person. And that is, you can only be with them and let them be with and through you. And that is a profound interrelationality. Thich Nhat Hanh calls it interbeing. He understands emptiness as the realization of interbeing, which is also a profound Neoplatonic claim. And I think the knowing, the virtuous knowing of all, using all of the kinds of knowing oriented to what is true, good, and beautiful, I think that virtuous knowing, realization of interbeing is love. That's what I think Tanabe means.
That's excellent. Yeah, I watched your talk with Ken Lowry and the quite estimable DC Schindler,
Oh
and
yeah.
it was great because you were saying like not only is it up and across, but it's down, and I
Yes.
feel like Iamblichus is teaching me that, and it's easy, especially with, like you said, infatuation and things like that, to get really drawn out
Caught
of
up in the
yourself
up.
too much. And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
all of a sudden, your kingdom is ruined, right?
yeah,
Your these great Japanese tragedies, or King Lear, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
you get pulled out of yourself and ruin befalls everything around you. Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, we talk about getting caught up. We can get caught up in the upness and forget the in outness and the downness. If
Yeah.
you'll allow me to speak phenomenologically, and then
I
we
would
become
love for you to only speak phenomenologically. Yeah.
well, I'm trying to, but it's hard. I think this is a longer issue. I think you can't fully separate phenomenological language and functional language. I think those are bound up together in an important way.
As they should be, right? Like if your theories don't match your reality, are they
Yes,
really part of loving the real? Um,
yes, yes.
yeah. And so to talk about the interrelating, I asked a few of your beloved friends to maybe say something. So I'm going to read a letter Rick wrote to me last night. He said, "What I love about John is the title." He says, "My first encounter with John, as he knows, was when I asked him out of the blue, as a total stranger, if he could write a chapter for my anthology on the philosophy of meditation." It's a little long because Rick's a philosophy professor and he writes a lot.
Of course.
But only after a 1 month deadline, and he tentatively agreed, asking only for a 1 week extension, whereas most anthology draft deadlines aren't due for at least a half a year or more after being invited. Shortly after, he invited me on his Voices with Vervaeke channel. And the first time we met there, he was so welcoming, receptive, appreciative, supporting, encouraging, and friendly that I immediately considered him a friend. John is an incredibly intelligent, knowledgeable, intellectually powerful philosopher in the truest sense of the word, both theoretical and practical, as well as an equally talented cognitive scientist. John is simultaneously epistemically humble on the one hand, while quite capable of making powerful, rationally persuasive arguments for the views and values he accepts on the other hand. He has a rare gift of being able to critique opposing views and to touch on difficult topics with grace. This is virtue, right? Grace, dignity, and integrity, where what comes across is not philia Nikeia, but philia Sophia, the love of wisdom, of the true, the good, and the beautiful. John is a very spiritually advanced soul, a beautiful and sweet human being, and an important sage in the making at a kairos point in human history that has called him forth to play a crucial role. His calling to help create a global community of communities of practitioners, scholars, researchers, explorers, inventors, and the followers of the true love of wisdom and what he calls the religion that is not a religion is great. John exemplifies a host of ethical, intellectual, epistemic, and spiritual virtues together with humility. And I cannot help but feel that simply being in his presence is a gift. That's very Merleau-Ponty or some of the French existentialists. Let me just finish. It's almost done. And more so, being his friend is a greater gift. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that this strikes me as a similar to the way Alcibiades felt in the presence of Socrates, when he claimed that he could even sense if Socrates was in a house that he had entered prior to hearing or seeing Socrates. John's image belongs in a contemporary remake of Raphael's Academy. And then he has counterfactual 1, 2, and 3, deep thought 1 and 2, gratitude 1 and 2, and concluding compliment. I'll just read that. It says, John has called me amazing and remarkable, but he is both of these, but also very noble, judicious, discriminately wise, caring, loving, and piously devoted to the true, the good, the beautiful. I love John.
Well, I love Rick, and I really appreciate that. He, of course, is his love is making him speak hyperbolically. I'm not a sage, and I pray and aspire that I can live up to make those words that he's uttered, and I mean this. I mean this as true as I possibly can.
Well, isn't love aspirational, like in
It
general? I
is.
think a lot about Callard and like that we can't know. You talked almost like, well, we can't, we have to leave ourselves in our categories to actually know this dimension of connection.
Love is properly aspirational. Exactly. I think that's right. And I think because all virtues are properly aspirational, because what we're trying to do is we want to become something other than we are. We want to We want to take on wants and desires and preferences and orientations that we don't currently have. And that it makes all virtues profoundly aspirational. And then love is this really interesting way in which we sort of mutually aspire through each other. And that is, I think, a very powerful. I mean, Sarah and I decided to make a lifetime commitment, not because we were in the throes of infatuation or because of the finances or because we wanted children or anything like that. We had been together over 8 years, and we decided that it was a very reasonable conclusion that we reliably bring out the best in each other. So that is why we committed to being together for a lifetime. I know that as long as I can stay in her presence, there's a good chance I'll become a better person, and she feels the same about me. And uh, I feel the same way about Rick that he said about me. He likes to come into my presence. I love coming into his. And that's deep philia. So I really appreciate what Rick has to say.
That's what's cool about friends is they lift us up, they expose our vulnerabilities, and they reshape us. And I've been really appreciating that more and more as uh, relationships deepen in my life, how important they are, and how I shouldn't trivialize them, and how when I'm spending time with my friends and I'm distracted, for example, or I'm too self-involved, right? Both of those things actually uh, reduce what could be, and that what could be, right? Go ahead, please, John.
Well, but you're on Plato's pivot point. That you see, that's what love. That's the astonishing thing, and that's sort of the miracle. Because I keep coming to how do we involve all of the self without becoming self-involved, and that's what love does. It's the virtue that most does that. All the virtues do that, but love calls all of us into relationship, and but it also calls us to not be self-involved in that relationship.
That like beauty calls me out, and then like truth and goodness like humble me back to a good level. Like if beauty is inflation, and it often like does
Yeah.
that, the humility, and that's why the dialectic of friendship is actually like almost a counteracting to the infatuation and the inflation. Because then when someone sees you in a way, you go, oh, that is true. And when they don't, you go, oh, that's probably true too. I shouldn't just take the good. I should take both. And I go, oh, I'm
Well,
translating. Yeah.
I think of some a little bit similar, but a little bit different. I do think that beauty is that which draws us beyond. But I think beauty also humbles us. I think each of the transcendentals calls us and humbles us at the same time. It calls us to wonder. There's the depths of reality that truth calls us to. But you can do it. You can get there like you can say the same thing with a different tone of voice. There is so much more than me. And that's the wonder, and that's the transcendence, and then you go, oh, there's so much more than me. And that's the humbling and the finitude. And what you should be doing is like almost like, throat singing or something where you're doing the two tones at the same time, right? Yeah, so I think of all of the transcendentals as simultaneously uh, calling us to the beyond while rounding us in the finite. And then, like I say, when we love them, we're coming into a relationship to them that in which, like Tillich talks about, your spirit is just your whole person, what that which involves your whole person, but precisely, right, doesn't make you egocentric. Um, and that's the astonishing thing. That's the astonishing thing about it. And it's a gift given to us by evolution that we were, primate mammals, and we had to not learn, we had to come constitutionally abled and enabled to turn the profound arrow of relevance, self-relevance that is necessary to our agency outward to another. And that is just astonishing. What a gift. What a gift. We did nothing to earn it. It is a gift.
Well, like our ancestors earned it for us, and now we're carrying it, I think is correct. Because
Yeah.
Jonathan Peugeot says about love that like real love is when the parts are loving each other, that makes the whole love. So it's not like there's a whole only emanating into us. It's like we're making the love by being vulnerable, by caring a little more than like we maybe could or should or would. And Yeah, like it's like cheating at life, that little idea that you and other people say when you say just share a part of yourself, right? Little secrets about you open the door for relationship, and just
Yeah.
saying, I like that. Oh, I don't like that. And all of a sudden, like you said, like the mutual modeling can start happening and
Yes.
trust can start happening. And then all of a sudden, like a new being that neither of you knew existed is starting to like emerge,
Yeah.
and
You
what's
get,
happening there. Yeah.
yeah, it's a mutual modeling. It's a mutual midwifing. When no matter which the kind of love, the eros, the philia, the agape, but the agape the most. Philia at times is profound, but agape is calling to a kind of ultimacy in that midwifing, because it's about initially raising children, right? Which is, kind of an ultimate. We go from, not in the moral sense, but in the cognitive causal sense, we go from a non-person to a person, because of agape, and we're sustained by agape, and we are called to agape. And I think every good romantic relationship actually has all three loves in it, and they
Uh-huh,
mutually,
I agree. Yeah.
yeah,
I think if you
and
only have one or two, you end up with hot passion, but no real connection or meaning, or
yeah,
only long-term goals, but nothing
yeah.
short-term. And when you start to get all of them, you get like the passion and the depth and the openness and stuff all harmonizing. And like you said, it's like both people are bottomless. So it's not like you're trying to exhaust the love from another person and use it
No, no,
for
it's not.
advantage. You're just like feeding
Yeah,
it.
it's
Yeah.
not. It's not zero sum. That's the whole
No,
point.
yeah, exactly. It's one times one, not one plus one, as Corban says.
Yeah, and it's because it's non-zero sum, it gives us a tremendous capacity to get out of game theoretic dilemmas and cul-de-sacs. Yeah, yeah, that is a profound thing about it, that it can do that for us.
Yeah, because like I studied teams, not to get too technical or off topic, but like a team affords something that an individual can't get without the team, and that's easy to take for
Oh, for
granted.
sure. Yeah.
But there's something like, oh, I love science, and I could read about it all day. But if I can join a team of 4 or 5 scientists that love the same thing as me, we're doing like world-changing research
Oh, yeah, yeah,
sometimes. We're
yeah.
really, yeah, yeah. Maybe talk about that. How have you been in part of like a scientific love, where you're like, oh my gosh, it's catching fire, and you're just excited about what's happening together that couldn't have happened alone.
Well, I mean, I can tell you something that just happened to me recently.
Nice.
We had UTism at the University of Toronto this past weekend, which is our cognitive science um, international symposium, put together by the Cognitive Science Student Association. And it was also a reunion, an alumni reunion. So many of my former students, Mark Miller was there, Leo Trottier was there, Blake Richards was there, Tim Lillicrap was there, and they're all speakers. And Tim and Blake were both keynotes. Nick Trick Brown was there. Um, and I I was agapically proud of them, just what they've become. And they were expressing profound gratitude to me. And you realize how you know, how we grow each other and we make each other possible. And like, and this, and they helped, and a lot of other people grow the cognitive science program into something that's now has a vital, powerful life of its own. Um, and you you're humbled by it. And that's what's, I mean, you could become narcissistic and consume it and say, look at how great I am. But
No, but I
um,
didn't hear an iota of that in what you were saying. I heard you saying, like, to circle a little bit, I heard you saying, look, I cared about these people and this project, and even other people started it. And now we're like way later and almost like nostalgically looking back and going,
yeah,
wow, what have we done? Yeah.
yes. And we were doing that together and also reciprocally with each other. But
That's the we. That's the we. We
well,
can't
there's
have
a,
an I in with a we.
well, Hegel, the I that is we that is I,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right.
Right, right.
And I think that's I think Hegel's right. That is As long as the we also includes the world, which is I'm finding a little bit hard to
Well,
find.
Heidegger does that. Like he says, like we're kind of stuck in society, and knowing the world is actually hard. So especially the Germans have a trouble with that. But yeah, like that's why I love nature and even architecture and stuff like that. Is like that's almost between me and space, or me and space and time, or something like that. It's very human, of course, but it's also like I've heard you say, it's like I'm naked and there's the atmosphere, or something like that.
Yeah,
Is
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's something I want to emphasize that also comes up when thinking about that. And like Blake and Tim and Mark also exercised profound discipline in the good sense of the word, that following. Virtues have to be practiced and cultivated. If what we're talking about love is right, that it's fundamentally a virtue, and it's not just an individualistic virtue, but like you said, this distributed virtue that takes on a life of its own, has a logos of its own, the logos of love. Um, I want to challenge the idea of that love is something that happens to us. There's something right about that because we participate in love, but there's something wrong about it as we've come to understand love as a passion, and love is not a passion. Love is something, love is a virtue, and all virtues require disciplined practice and cultivation over years. I think maybe now in the 63rd year of my life, I am getting a bit of the virtue of love. And I've come to realize that if I was given one wish from Aladdin's lamp, I would want to be able to comprehensively and as much as possible for me to love wisely. That would be what I would ask.
Wow, yeah. It's like the ultimate dependent variable to understand. I was thinking earlier, and if you know it, it can impact everything. It impacts everything. It's this weird variable if you couch it that way, because yeah, it does call you out of yourself, and especially if you're at like a lull or don't have enough love inside, like that's maybe what you need even sometimes. But it also like self-discipline and looking into what you value can also really like unite those two if
It,
that's
it,
not too extreme.
no, no, that's good, but you also bumped up against something, and I saw it more in your body than like
Yeah,
there's also like there's the discipline, and there's also you have to commit to healing. You have to find, you have to I practice daily what's holding, trying to realize and address and work with and dialogue with what is holding me back from agape, what is holding me
yeah,
back from philia, even what is holding me back from eros. Because even if you think you have powerful sexual drives, that doesn't mean you're not holding back from eros in really powerful ways. Um, and so there's ways in which, as I said, because love makes us vulnerable, we have been wounded by it too.
right,
And
right.
a part of the healing of, right, so part of the cultivation, the disciplining of love is the disciplining to commit yourself to real healing,
Yeah,
which is
yeah, yeah.
also not an easy task. And it is not something that you can just trust to some passion that overtakes you. The passion won't heal you. It
Well, that's
won't.
what both St. Augustine and Shinran discovered later in their life. I've been reading a lot about this stuff, and they both had this metanoia that it's not to destroy lust, nor to deny it, nor to be consumed by it. Like it's so much more than that. And
Yeah.
I like the idea of like eros into agape, and what I mean by that sometimes is like self-love, working through my own pain, feeling self-love at the end of that process affords me the capacity to like be better and by
And
and
vice
love,
versa.
yeah,
And vice versa. That's
right,
Plato's
right, right, so it's
pedagogy.
positive, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sorry for interrupting. Yeah, and vice versa. True agapic orientation towards others opens up a mirror into your own self-knowledge that you can't generate on your own. Right. And you can't do it that way. It's Schlingerland's trying not to try. If you try and make people instrumentally as a mirror, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
well, and that's like the Nosferatu, that's like the vampire curse.
Yes, yes.
You try to
Vampires.
control
Yeah, yeah.
all the love, you end up in this like outer weird world. I watched Bram Stoker's Dracula, and the vampire character is in this like pseudo reality. He's not even in
Yeah.
like reality. And it's so interesting the way that the desire to control love, to have love, to we didn't even talk about Socrates leaving the city to go talk about love outside the city and things like
Yeah.
that. It's a great debate that I've seen both sides of. It's like I want to control someone. Maybe I want to keep them away from things that make them smarter, or do I want to like point them towards love and things like that? It's such a an interesting dichotomy that has,
Well, that's another thing I think, and this is an argument I'm working on right now because it has to do with orientation and optimal gripping and being true to the true, the good, and the beautiful. But I think at the heart of all virtues is this learned ignorance, and that's what love does. It takes you to it, sort of gets you in this profound self-knowledge and knowledge of the other, only to realize how profoundly ignorant you are because of the transcending mysteries.
let me read this for you. It's from Thomas Taylor. He says, but from some particular thing which is made the subject of hypothesis, he's talking about love and doubt and stuff like that. The transition is easy to that which is simply supposed, though we should in no respect accede to it, but be carried in that which is most simple in us, should form a suspicion concerning that which is prior to all things. The one, therefore, is thus effable and thus ineffable. And that which is beyond it is to be honored in the most perfect silence. And prior to this, by the most perfect ignorance, which despises all knowledge. And he's saying not that knowledge is bad, but that especially once you have a lot of knowledge, you want to almost like distance yourself from it to
Yeah.
love.
And
You know.
and I'm feeling that temptation right now, right? Right. There's the temptation to take on, and I while you were talking, right? Even before you read the Taylor quote, and then there was a synchronicity there. I was realizing it's kind of like Hermes reminding me. I'm realizing that I'm taking on the role of the expert, which is of course a performative contradiction and a hypocrisy about the very thing that I'm coming into relationship to. And not that I'm Socrates, but I'm reminded of when Socrates was in the symposium and his daemonium reminded him, right? He had actually not spoken correctly about love, that he hadn't taken the right stance towards it. And I just realized, yeah, that temptation is there. And so while I I obviously believe everything I've been saying to everyone here, there's a way in which don't look at it, everyone. Try and look through it and
That's
beyond it. And
what
don't,
Heidegger would say.
yeah, and um, I'm I'm speaking like somebody who's journeyed and continues to, and I'm not an expert, and I think I'm wary of people who claim expertise in a virtue like love. Um, I think what we can do is do what we're doing here. I think two good friends in philia can catch a logos, and it can help us properly orient and aspire towards love, and we should celebrate that. And we were getting caught up in the transcendence of that. But Taylor's quote and what was happening in me both remind me, yes, but you are not eros, you are not love, you are a finite primate mammal struggling to understand a force that has been moving life for millennia. And so yeah, I just wanted to say that it's really important when you were talking about this to to bring it's like the self-knowing in the intensive retreats, right? Where you let it come to full expression, but then you reorient to the emptiness within it and you drop back to, okay, yes, that was all true, but it wasn't completely true. Or it's like Elgin talks about
Not
it.
the master plan. We haven't just solved it and it's the master plan. Like I think
Well,
that's what you're
the way I think about it is like she's done work about in science, the true enough. We use these diagrams like the solar system of the atom, that they're true enough to properly train us, to properly get us to the place where we have the needed knowledge to then move closer towards the truth. But that in itself is, and there's always epistemically trying to correct, but it's always true enough for our training, right? And you're playing these two off against each other constantly. And so you, in some ways, you have a true enough understanding of your partner, so you can be you can train being true to them, but you never have the truth of your partner. And because if they stop surprising you, you're not seeing them anymore.
Well, that's what I always say to people is like, oh, you surprised me today. Like people that are very close to me. And I mean it. I don't just say it. I mean,
That's
sometimes I
excellent.
be playful, but like all the time yesterday I heard a story from someone I care deeply about that I'd never heard in the lifetime of our relationship, which is very, very long. And I was like trying to savor that and let it like sink in a little bit and go like, oh, how cool is that? Yesterday I was bored by you. Today I'm like, re in love with you. And I'm just like, remembering who you are and why I care about you even more. Um,
Yeah. And I mean, and Sarah and I both comment on this. I mean, it's obvious with your children because you keep falling in love with them because they keep becoming not only a new person but a new kind of person, right? That the child and and then an adolescent and then a young adult and so you keep falling in love with them again. Um, but it's also Sarah and I have talked about that, and this is for both of us something we hadn't experienced deeply in other long-term romantic relationships. Yeah, you're surprised and you fall in love again, and you're surprised and you fall in love again, and you're surprised and you fall in love again. And that reminds me of Shinru Suzuki, uh,
Suzuki.
Suzuki. Sorry, oh, that was a
We've been in
weird.
love so long, our brains are tired, John. We can
No,
we can
no, yeah, no, Suzuki. It's because my brain is telling me don't say DT Suzuki, say Shunru, and then it's right. But Suzuki's, beginner's mind that we're constantly in beginner's mind, which doesn't mean, right? It means this kind of learned ignorance, learned ignorance, learned ignorance, learned ignorance, learned ignorance.
yeah, because you have to keep like discarding your image of the other person. It like fills up and then you have to discard it and open your eyes again. And
Yeah, I mean it's that, but for me
yeah,
the metaphor is usually it goes from being an image to being imaginal. I go from looking at it to looking through it, and I step through it,
yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
called to something else. And then there's a new image, and then for a while I look at it, and then it becomes imaginal, and I'm called through it to something beyond it.
Well, you're really cool in the way you think about these things and have a pretty complex understanding of symbolism and people and things like that. And it's like it's cool that even through participation, through knowing each other and being vulnerable and sharing yourself, like we get to know each other and almost like a brand new symbol in being is birthed when two people are in relationship. And
That's wow, Robert, that was beautiful. That said it better than a lot of what I said. That a brand new symbol in is birthed, and it's a symbol, yeah, of sort of a way in which reality can be that
yeah,
was
yeah. Because I
previously.
like weddings and the symbolon. And at a wedding, Rob is not the center of another person's wedding, but I'm there to be and to give and to appreciate and to know. And in that knowing, something happened that day, something is being celebrated that is not like a history of the world so much as the new history of the world.
Yeah, and a wedding, I don't know if it still is. The wedding was simultaneously a celebration and a commitment because love is a virtue and it requires cultivation and discipline, and that requires committed support from a distributed network with collective intelligence. And the original point of a wedding is these are all the people that are making it was not only the bride and the groom making a promise to each other. Um, and I'm not I'm not privileging heterosexual relationships. I'm just using those as uh, titles, right?
Right, right.
Uh,
Two lovers, two
yeah,
lovers
yeah,
committing to each other forever, in theory.
better, better. Yeah, it's not just that; it's all the people there committing to them and to their love, right? And it should almost be that there should be a part where we all a vow is asked from all of us. So the lovers make vows to each other, and then it should be all those present because all those present have to not object to the wedding, but that's only negative freedom, right? We should also say, and does everybody here commit to trying to help and support and nourish this relationship, which we should. And I think it would be great if we added that into weddings, that extra vow.
Well, you should have seen Rick's wedding because we did this like dance where people were like throwing fake money in the middle to celebrate the peripheral
Yeah,
part, and then everyone, Rick's sisters, his wife's daughter, all of these people were like profusely sharing in each other, and it was seeing each other for the first time. Everyone met me for the first time. There was other people that had never met each other, and so there's this like seeing and sharing, and you're right, it's not just about the couple, it's about this community and the whole ecology of the people that
yeah,
are out to kind of be in this journey together. And the lows, right? It's easy to remember the highs, but then the lows are where a lot of that comes in, and you're
yeah.
so glad you had a big wedding full of loving people. And it really takes a village, I think. Uh,
I mean, and we had similar things when children were born. And that's was what originally what was happening with godparents.
That's what
Godparents.
I was thinking. Yeah, I was like, how awesome would it be for someone to ask you to be a godparent? Because they're really saying, if the most tragic thing happens to me, I trust you with the most important thing that I've ever created.
Yeah, yes,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. So we should, yeah, we should have godparents at a wedding as well because it's not we're helping to, you know, commit to supporting or god family maybe at a wedding because we're all committing to that. And I mean, and that's I mean. You taste what John says in the epistle that God is agape, right? And you taste that and you participate in it. Um, and the paradoxical thing about it, you know, and we are the body of Christ, right? Is it's not reducible to us, but it doesn't work independent from us. And agape doesn't float free. It's always incarnated in and through people, but it's incarnated through not in it doesn't belong to anyone, and it's flowing to beings who are not yet capable of agapic love, but become persons capable of agapic love. It's a very like I said, um, we are just so it's just so obvious to us because, well, in some ways it's not, but in some ways it's obvious to us because of our evolutionary heritage. It would be so great if we could meet aliens who had a completely different evolutionary heritage and they would be looking on agape and they would probably find it almost akin to magic. These human beings, they just sort of do this thing to this, right, to their children, their newborns, and then they turn into persons, moral agents capable of transcendence and agape, and it's just like we forget how miraculous, in the non-supernatural sense, that really is.
yeah, because in the Cartesian world, forces are pushing things around, but in the Socratic world, character is pushing things around. And
Yes.
by being loved and expressing friendship and accepting love, we are changed. And when we're changed, the world is changed. And it's profound for sure. Sorry about the noise if you hear it at all.
No, I
But
don't hear anything.
oh, perfect. Yeah, they're like blowing leaves outside. Zoom's amazing. So yeah, it's so participatory and personal and important at a personal level. That's what's so interesting to me.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. So the two things that we put at odds with each other, it's deeply personal and it's deeply participatory, right? And
And
love is saying, no, they're not at odds. They're at one. And you know, and you have Frankfurt's idea that love is a voluntary necessity. We seem to be choosing to be doing something that precedes us and that seems inevitable for us, and binds us in powerful ways, and um, and in that sense, I think love is kind of the it's mythos in the sense of it's bringing relevance, realization, and its religio into an awareness and activating it and orienting it towards the normative. And you know, Hegel has this idea of this is how the Geistlich, this is how the spiritual beings are created when this stuff is, and I would say exapted, but the same sort of thing. And I just that so I find that it reaches like love reaches deeply, deeply into my animal ancestry, but it also reaches up into my angelic aspiration, and it's just holding those together. It's this profound tonos. It's holding the voluntary and the necessary together. It's holding the personal and the participatory together. It's and I mean, and this is again why you in the Gospels you have the idea that agapic love is that which holds all things together.
Well, I
Um,
thought of Eckhart when you were speaking, because Eckhart, like, he's so good at this because he doesn't turn into actions and deeds. I mean, he talks about that, but he's like, just be open and prepare and maybe like melt into the good. And then once you have that inside of you, act outwardly. It's very interesting in that like you don't have to be doing to get love. You can actually just like apophatically open and then embody that or participate in something that's not so
yeah.
personal, be transformed by that.
And that's part of where I think we got confused by a superficial similarity. The overflowing of love, which you're describing, and this is Eckhart's model, and of course he gets it ultimately from the Neoplatonic tradition, Plotinus, right? The overflowing of the one, which is ultimately mysterious. Why does the love? Why does the one overflow? Well, Christianity says because the one is also, agapic in some way, right? Um, but that overflowing of love can be confused with the impulsivity, right, of passion, and that's not. But I just sort of that's not what the overflow means. The overflow means like when you're writing a poem and it takes on a life of its own and it starts to overflow, right? And it has that voluntary necessity and it's deeply personal and deeply participatory, right? And it reaches deep into you, but it's reaching deep beyond you. That's overflow. And again, I think we have there's a phenomenological superficial similarity between those two. And then I think and maybe that's part of what romanticism did when it started to degenerate, is we've confused that overflow with passion. And it's not. The think overflow is Overflow is an expression of virtuality that has profound vitality. When you're watching the violinist and you get the and overflow and flow, they're in that, and there's that overflow, and that's not because they just picked it up and
No,
impulsively.
no. I was thinking because it's like the training
Yeah, the
and the
training.
effort, all of
Yeah,
the commitment and the effort and the priorness
yes.
of a person is now on display and almost like coming from nowhere. And if you're a witness, you're just in awe of it because you can't even believe it's real. And it starts to reframe how you view the
Yeah.
world.
And there again, the learned ignorance. You all the learning, and then it overflows in a way that you're ultimately sort of ignorant of. Because if you understood it, it wouldn't be that self-transcendence. It would just be self-extension. But when it's genuine self-transcendence, there's a mystery to the self, because and it's experiencing the overflow.
Right, because all of a sudden you can be the most frigid, cynical person, and you go, wait, no, how did that happen? And all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're not cynical for that moment, and it might
Yeah.
even ripple out into the rest of your thinking.
And the Buddhists rightly say, keep following that. Like,
Right.
you recall that a distraction, but then and you can, but what keeps, like, you can follow the calling voice, and then you open up into this, well, you open up into emptiness again, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because like savoring has transformed the way I look at even meditation, I think. And you can savor the bottom up and it pulls you out of yourself without being a top-down thing. And I remember when we were doing the Stoicism course and you were like, you can savor anything. And it just was like I had studied the research and I'd read some of the books. I'm like, yeah, you can. And it's like
Yep.
combining that with my practice, even a worry became like a path to the good and things like that.
Yeah, that, and I've been going back, trying to. I'm reading a very good book on Hellenistic wisdom, and it's going through all the schools.
What's it
And
called? Do you remember?
no, I think it's Hellenistic Wisdom for Today, something like that. I can
I
find the
just know a
title.
lot of people love your books. I thought if you remembered it.
Yeah, I don't remember. I use it in my practices. So, yeah, that's negligent on my part.
No,
Um,
we're always learning about love, John. It's a kind of a great thing about even talking about it is that you might leave with new ideas. and new ways to appreciate your partner or yourself. And
But
even in dialogue, we're able to learn about love. It's really profound.
I agree. What I was saying is I'm remembering it's the Epicureans and this savoring.
Right, right. Well, the Epicurus was like amazing at ataraxia, and I think ataraxia is like a great place to be if you want to start trying to be in love with the world or love yourself more. I
Yeah,
think so.
uh,
Getting to that
yeah,
calm, free place.
yeah. I think the great gift of the Epicureans is to remind us about subjective well-being and savoring.
Right, right. Because if you take that plus like the Stoic objectivity and the Neoplatonic transjectivity, and you start to kind of play with
Well,
them.
exactly, exactly. The Epicureans are this side of anagoge, and the Stoics are that side. And then when they flow in reciprocal opening, you get proper anagoge. Yeah, I think that's right. And again, love has those aspects in it. There's the you savor it makes you savor life and even yourself in ways that you didn't before. But it also opens you up to the call of the normativity of the true and the good and the beautiful, the way the Stoics are trying to always call us to that and call us deeper into, yes, but be true to reality. And how do I true to reality, Mr. Stoic? Well, virtue. Virtue is being true to reality. That's what it is. And then, of course, the Neoplatonists come along and say, yeah, but put them together and make them flow.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's so amazing. Like the Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Musonius Rufus, if you've ever read him, like they get the giving part and the worldliness. And then Epicureans, they get like you have a lot of Epicurean followers, I would say. I've had some really good conversations with people where we're like, we're both kind of Epicurus and stuff like that. And going like, okay, well, what's taking care of me? How do I enjoy bread? Even those little basic things. And
Yeah,
then start to combine both of those or do like dream work or do Platinian contemplation
yeah,
in addition to those two, and you're like, oh wow, this whole world is like an ecstatic world full of potential in the Aristotelian ancient sense, and I'm like a co-creator
yep.
in that beauty.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, Rob. That's really beautiful.
Well, let's end there then. Maybe what's maybe a last word on love? And yeah, I think this has been a joy.
Remember love in finite transcendence, right? You are, yes, it calls you to the heights of your aspiration, but it also exposes you to the deepest vulnerabilities and potential for wounding and loss. And hold the two together. If you only hold the first, you'll give in to inflation and hubris. If you only fall into the second, you will despair of love and you will become a cynic and you will become embittered. You'd want to be neither. And aspire instead, I would recommend to love as wisely as you possibly can and to continue to grow in loving wisdom and wise love.
And where would you spend a Valentine's Day date if you were going on one today, just to bring it back down to earth a little bit? That was amazing. But yeah, what's like a fun handholdy version of that?
I wish I could be with Sarah. I wish I could be with Sarah in Delphi right now. I would
Maybe
love.
next year. Maybe next year. Yeah, that's wonderful. And so last question, just what's like one or two of your either book recommendations or like episodes from any of your series that you think really, if someone's in the mood to learn more about love, that would be the place to go.
Many people like the episode in Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. I think I don't know if it's 14 or 15 or 16, but that's just on agape. I think the discussions with Ken and David about love, I think are excellent. I think reading Love in the Postmodern Predicament by D.C. Schindler is amazing. Um, those would be, I think, really important things to take a look at.
As a friend, as someone who I've bought a mango smoothie from McDonald's one time at, and I you bought me a Diet Coke one time a
Yeah.
1,000 years ago. It feels like as someone like that, John, I just want to say I love you and I respect you. We didn't even talk about respect, which I think is like the twin of love.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
and have a happy Valentine's Day. Maybe just say happy Valentine's Day to everyone that loves you.
Well, I love you too. And also read Iris Murdoch's The Sovereignty of the Good, which has some of the best things. Love is the painful recognition that something other than yourself is real. I think this is a really powerful thing. To everybody, happy Valentine's Day. Celebrate and remember.
Awesome, John. I will talk to you literally tomorrow. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you so
All
much.
right.
You're a good
Yeah,
friend.
yeah, you're a good friend too.
Bye.
Great. It's great to see you, John. Would you do like a side profile for the thumbnail with a little like hand heart? Yeah, yeah.
Like
You know the little hand hearts? Yeah. Yeah, that's and then just look sideways a little bit while you're doing it.
like that?
There you go. Perfect. Yeah, I'll clip that at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Little gestures of love, right? Like embodied
Yeah.
love. Yeah.
Yeah.